Hey there, welcome to episode 28 of the FFS Talk audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. Today is June 6, 2024, a very warm Thursday here in the greater Vegas area. Today we are going to talk about, we being me, myself, and I, online debates, debatable. It'd be nice if there was someone here to debate with, I suppose, but for today, once again, a solo episode. Will that ever change? Perhaps. It would be nice. This is ideally a discussion, possibly ironically, potential for some debate when it comes to the, if you're not familiar, the idea for this particular show is to talk about what works, what does not, and what we can do about it. So presumably there would be some debate over the notion of what works and what doesn't on a particular topic or in a particular focus area, and then a solution if needed. Well, there might be more than one. We shall see. Anyway, today we have some show notes. Ideally, wherever you found this audio program, you are able to see an episode description. The show notes and the links associated with today's episode will be there. Hopefully you can read them, find them. If not, eventually, the ffstalks.com website will be alive. The announcement of that launch, which I've been talking about for too long, the primary point of publication where a publisher of content can have some control, a modicum of control, over what is displayed, where it is displayed, how it looks, possibly supporting accessibility. Ironically, audio programs are difficult to read, so transcripts should be available. I believe Spotify automatically generates them. I really have been irresponsible in making that more obvious. So a lot of moving pieces. They all fit into both of my Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program on the development side and the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program on the startup side. Building websites that will interoperate is a part of the overall plan. An army of one can only advance so much in each direction. So not an excuse, just a little update. Everything is moving along at one person speed. Joy. Anyway, on with the show. Today, again, we're talking about debates, online debates, debatable. Summary of today's show, which I will read, which appears in the show notes. Online debates are all the rage, but are they even debates anymore? Should a debate have an after-action smackdown session, which they usually do, declarations of victory and celebrations of the crushing and ultimate destruction of the other side, which is essentially why online debates take place at this point, which is problematic sometimes, often. Today's links, the first two, as usual, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. You are under no obligation to buy or spend any money on anything at this or the Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo sites. Those are the first two shameless self-promotion links. But I will post official links to the newly launching, eventually, websites and other tools and things. And if we do eventually get some video discussions going, I think there will be an audio version that continues along the numbering and style, ideally with guests though. I used to have guests on the Let's Innovate for Vegas, and also on the Cafe Genius Impresarios programs. Getting people to commit and follow through has been a joy, but we'll get there. So if we add some video either offline, similar to this, but with video discussions, which would be interesting in the cases where there is some visualization. Of course, making that accessible is always fun, but there are cases where a presentation of some sort, a diagram, a map, might come in handy. So we'll see how that goes. The use of the Buy Me a Coffee site is interesting because it is a sort of a free-form page. It's really not unlike a link tree or similar, but you get to insert some descriptive text and whatnot. So it's freeform. I like that part, so I use buymeacoffee.com for that primarily. You are more than welcome to buy me a coffee. All of my projects are powered by coffee. Do note, I'm trying to make this clear to people in general, the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program is part of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation efforts. Innovate for Vegas Foundation is a 501c3 public charity. It's a Nevada nonprofit. So you can support my efforts there, but if you would like to support that foundation, that's a different thing. That's you can go to the website, innovateforvegas.org. Donations are to a 501c3 in that case, and consult your tax professional regarding how you can deduct those from your taxable income. On with the rest of the links. I will begin, as usual, with a Wikipedia link. Wikipedia is itself a great place to begin a journey learning about something, looking up details, finding a starting point. Start at Wikipedia. You should not end there, only because Wikipedia is always subject to debate itself. So you can begin there, continue your journey of learning, researching. Do your own research, as they say, which doesn't mean watching Joe Rogan. I have a couple of YouTube debates that I'll refer to in general. You can certainly watch them if you want. I've watched all of two of these, but especially the Hitchens versus Hitchens. And I've watched big chunks of other ones. They all kind of feel the same after a while, which is one of the focus areas of this episode today. Finkelstein, I think I'm saying that right. Stein. It's the E and the I. You can swap them. Finkelstein, Destiny, Rabini, and Morris were hosting. They were hosted by Lex Friedman. Lex is another one. He's a little odd. He is sort of an intellectual, so he makes for an interesting potential moderator, but he's also very passive, very quiet. His persona is anyway. So mostly it's just these four people sitting at a table. Similarly, Ben Shapiro versus Destiny, once again, hosted by Lex Friedman. So those first two revolve around, the fact that Destiny was included in these two debates that I'm referring to is interesting. I'll get into why, but they were only interesting if you're interested in watching debate flow. As far as productivity or good faith, that's always questionable. You can judge for yourself. Chris Cuomo versus Dave Smith has been making some headlines of late. So today's June 6th. It was held about a week ago, give or take. And there are several problems with this particular debate, a word I will use very loosely here. One problem being that the host and moderator is Chris Cuomo's employer. So there's arguable impartiality there. As well, it was couched from the very beginning as an attack on Chris Cuomo. So it's really almost more of a court case. It's not really a debate so much as a cross-examination. So, I guess cross, because the opposition is basically putting Chris Cuomo on the stand and pelting him with proof that he is wrong. Now, I will say I'm not really a fan of either of the parties, Chris Cuomo nor Dave Smith. So I didn't watch this rooting for any particular side. The pandemic and the coverage and Anthony Fauci has been sitting in Congress being asked questions of all shapes and sizes. Fauci is himself problematic. The way various aspects of public science education during that time are problematic. So I believe there are better ways to approach discussions and potential learning from the way things unfolded, the way messaging was not done well. the way discovery was managed over time, and as science educates itself and facts become known, the way they are shared with a non-scientific, I guess, or not. Well, if you are a scientist in a lab versus a person just trying to get through the day doing their own business, work, education, life, they are only going to hear what they hear. They are not going to be embroiled in all of the science. So science education in this case was, how do you message about best practices for public health? And there were plenty of things to debate. History will ideally shine bright lights across the full spectrum of good and bad, and learning will take place. That would be nice. That is not the focus of this episode, but how we react to large-scale changing information is something to consider. Hitchens versus Hitchens. Now, this debate I saw a long time ago. It was after Christopher Hitchens had passed away. But the Hitchens brothers are rather famously, or were famously estranged, fairly different opinions. But it was interesting to see them on a stage. In this case, it was a public debate. You could argue it was sort of Lincoln Douglas-y, but the fact that they took questions from the audience made it sort of interesting. And while there was certainly some sniping, they were both very skilled at being clever, while also being skilled at presenting supporting evidence for their positions. So sometimes sniping at each other, sometimes cleverly returning the volley, but also making useful intellectual references, facts and opinions and so on. So a reasonable example of what you could say, any of these people here have strong disagreements in the examples I've given, and you can find countless others. Any presidential debate will have strong disagreements. You can make them productive and still clever, still some laughing and some clear small wins here and there. And surely Christopher Hitchens' fame helped him dominate, if you like. But still, you can see a productive debate in that case, or productive and entertaining, which I think is probably what they were going for, versus a straight up ring match, bar fight, however you want to look at some of these. The matching of skill and intent brings together a good faith debate that can still be fun and educational at the same time. Speaking of good faith, the bonum fide, good faith. If you check out that Wikipedia page, good faith. Now, the bona fides, you will hear that as credentials, which imply credibility for a person. So you bring your bona fides. But the term itself, bona fide, bonum fide, bona fide, bona fides. Bona fides is good faith. Bona fide is in good faith. So if you present your arguments in good faith, then you can be wrong and still have done right. If you adopt logical fallacies as part of your strategy, if you venture into ad hominem and worse, if you speak over your opponent, if you act in bad faith, then it makes the debate quite literally a fist fight, a bar fight, a smackdown. Becomes silly and becomes problematic, especially if, when we get to the clipping part, if you clip the choice moments of a bad faith debate, you end up with horrendous messaging that can go very, very far off the rails, but will appear, if taken out of context, to lend credibility to the bad faith side, if you will. So these things must be considered up front, whether you will be arguing, debating in good faith with your opponent or opponents, or if you are entering an ambush, for example, And you can see examples. If you want to see a good example of this, you can watch, and I've not linked to it here, you can seek it out. If you want to watch Anthony Weiner sitting on the, is it the PBD, Patrick Bet David, PBD podcast. So PBD hosted the, Patrick Bet David is another problematic actor here, but PBD hosted the Chris Cuomo, Dave Smith debate, which I've linked to. He also brought on Anthony Weiner, but he had himself and 4 or 5 other people that are on his panel show, which is definitely a show with agenda, and they all ganged up on him. So here you have bad faith debate. It went very severely into a dog pile, as they say. Everybody was speaking at once, talking over him, and so on. I'm not an Anthony Weiner fan in particular. I'm definitely not a fan of the PBD crew. It's interesting to watch sometimes, much like a train wreck, to see how these things unfold. Anyway, that's a good example of bad faith debate, which turns into a brawl. Bonum fide, not always found. Fallacies, another Wikipedia page about the list of fallacies you might come across. My favorite is, now I can't remember what my favorite fallacy is. I'm a strong believer that motivated reasoning is hugely problematic with social media, because people present a part of a story, collection of facts, pieces of data, interpretation of that data as some type of information. So a lot of this is based on different types of fallacies, claims made during a debate that are not checked. So I think appeal to authority is a really good one. Anyway, there are so many to choose from. I'm totally spacing on which. There's one that commonly comes up, and it's not coming to my mind, that you see often. But all these fallacies make an appearance, and it's when you can match. In fact, I'm going to say an interesting AI project would be real-time labeling, tagging, somehow highlighting when someone is speaking and they are using fallacious reasoning in their argument to actually label it. One true Scotsman, no true Scotsman, not one true Scotsman. There are different biases also. So my favorite bias is survivorship bias, if you like, and selection bias. So these are super easy. They come up frequently, so I'm not sure what the logical fallacy corresponding to those is. I'm not looking at the list right now. I usually, when I'm creating my works of art that are these audio programs, I have some notes written in Obsidian, so I have a section of links. I usually review the links before, and the tabs are open in this case. Sometimes I don't do that, which is annoying. So tabs are open, but I'm not here to read you Wikipedia pages. That's why I gave you the link. The selection bias is really easy to do, and we see this all the time. Motivated reasoning, selection bias. Selection bias can be self-selection bias, but really what you end up doing in both motivated reasoning and selection bias, you pick people, you pick references, research papers, other YouTube videos, etc. I've sort of done that here. I've selected a smattering of YouTube videos that you can watch that are not great. There are good debates. There are many debates. It would be impossible for me to spend all day talking about the good and the bad and the ugly here. But my point is not about these particular shows. So there are more examples. The general concept I'm hoping you will grasp based on your own travels and consumption of these types of presentations. But selection bias can be hugely problematic because it could be done not with intent. That is, there's an unintended selection bias that has become more sort of recognized now. It's called the warm introduction bias. If you only meet people that you are introduced to by mutual friends, then the the people you meet will all tend to be interconnected. So you limit yourself to meeting people who already know each other. In some cases, this is useful, but in other cases, you are completely avoiding meeting new people with new opinions, people with different social circles, different types of thinking, different social engagement locations and types, and so on. You'll find this when you travel to other countries. If you leave your cubicle at work every once in a while. But if you travel far, you will further your own cultural awareness. And this is where you are not enjoying a selection bias of proximity. You are escaping proximal engagement, and you're going for distal. And in that case, you are changing the selection. You're changing the population from which you might meet people. It's something to think about in general when people choose arguments to present in a debate. Are they reasonable and appropriate, or are they merely intended to further an agenda, which is not completely unreasonable? That's how court cases work. You usually will present evidence that supports the position, prosecutorial or defense. For example, the defense doesn't want to give evidence to the prosecutor. That's why a defendant will very often choose to not testify. So where evidence comes from to support an argument is interesting. Selection bias kind of factors in there. But if you're going to present something like a research paper or a study, and you select ahead of time a population that will support a preconceived notion, maybe a hypothesis, then you are not presenting a good faith research effort in the final product. And I have argued previously here in the Greater Vegas area that a study from 2023 on the entrepreneurial ecosystem of the state and then of the North Washoe County, South Clark County, and middle kind of rural Nevada ecosystems was fraught with selection bias because they only talk to warm introductions. So here the outcome is affected by the selection bias of the inputs. You can do the same thing in a debate. And if each side, and again, just like in a court case, you're not necessarily there to provide your opponent with supportive arguments or evidence or examples, but it is something to be aware of because sometimes the selection bias is incorrect. The one side may choose fallacious arguments, so the selection bias feeds into simply inaccurate information, right? Scientifically invalid, statistically invalid, etc. It could be anything. So here you should be attentive to how arguments are presented and what is presented. And then because there is no such thing as a policy debate on YouTube, those are not as exciting. No one is there to pull up real facts. No one is measuring the veracity of such facts, the validity, any sort of references. So you're kind of left with whatever the person remembers and chooses to present, whether true or not. And you can see so many of the examples of this. It's ridiculous. Finally, there's an Atlantic article. You may or may not like the Atlantic. I mostly don't take the Atlantic, but occasionally there will be an interesting article. So I'm not judging the article by the platform. In this case, I have, through the powers of motivated reasoning, I found this article. It agrees with what I'm saying, but presents, or I agree with it, one of those. It presents some other examples and facets that are interesting. For example, the Romney Obama debate, presidential debate many years ago. Obama makes a zinger out of a misstatement by Romney concerning Russia, the former Soviet Union, being America's greatest enemy, which at the time was actually, depending on your views, I suppose, was actually Al-Qaeda, certainly from a military expense viewpoint and recent attacks and so on. So Romney had said that Russia was our greatest enemy, and Obama made a fun comment about how the 80s foreign policy, no, the 80s wanted its foreign policy back. I think that's what it was. You can read the article. Yeah, so that's a zinger, but it also is clever enough and probably just the right amount of poke, not suggesting that Mitt Romney was ignorant, but mocking his misstatement. So you can choose, well, how that came out became more obvious later. You can choose whether that was appropriate or not. Clearly, in a real policy debate, you would not go for the zinger. You would say, it turns out that that's not the case, that we are actually facing a existential threat from, however that would proceed. So an interesting article, but it does refer to, and I want to get his name right, so I am going to pull that one. I'm off axis here, sorry. You've probably heard. So, so the article was written right after this happened. So Peter Hotez is a research scientist, was challenged by Joe Rogan to come, because Peter Hotez had made some critical comments about some allegations and assertions and claims made by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was on the Joe Rogan podcast around this time, about double-blind studies on vaccines and various other elements that Robert F. Kennedy claims expertise on because of his legal pursuits, court cases that he has represented plaintiffs or pursued some action, which does not necessarily make him a subject matter expert, whereas Peter Hotez could be considered a subject matter expert. So, of course, Joe Rogan challenged Peter Hotez to come on the show and debate RFK Jr., which makes for an interesting cage match, which Joe Rogan is familiar with, but it doesn't necessarily elevate an intellectual conversation or discussion or debate about vaccination science, about immunology studies. It would really just be a personality fight. I agree with that opinion. It would be interesting to see RFK. In fact, you could take two subject matter experts that are well versed with experience and expertise in immunology and virology, for example, with opposing views, different views on whether it's COVID specifically, or perhaps vaccine development, FDA approval process and studies, and different phases of validating vaccines and so on. So you could take different viewpoints of that, have RFK be the moderator, or perhaps on a panel to ask questions, so that his assertions could be challenged by subject matter experts with differing opinions. If I was going to watch an RFK Jr. based debate on vaccine technologies, immunology in general, he should not be participating as any form of subject matter expert. Unless you want to talk about court cases on those topics, then maybe that would be a different type of thing. But the proposal there was that it would be a discussion about immunology and virology, biology. It's simply not his area of expertise. And so it would be unproductive. It would be counterproductive. And I'll get into some of my views on that. So finally, we get to my main notes on this topic. Debates can be useful. I think that's been proven for hundreds or thousands of years, millions of years perhaps. I don't know. You could argue that evolution is a result of real debates on the ground by different evolutionary phases of life. A debate in good faith between two ideas can be productive and educational. In fact, if you did have two differing views on the development process, the phases of study and test groups and placebo and ethics and so on of the development of a vaccine, especially a new vaccine for a novel virus, that would be productive and educational for those watching. And in fact, it might be productive and educational not only for the audience, but perhaps for those participating. If a debate takes place and one or both sides of the issue come away with some sort of change or addition to their opinion, or maybe some notion corrected or adjusted, right? Maybe I wasn't as against this as I thought. Maybe I wasn't as for this as I thought. So there is a learning opportunity for all involved. That's what good faith debates are for, really. And they're good for that. While the notion of a winner and a loser in a debate is not uncommon, especially there are competitive debates. I will say when I was in high school, so a couple years ago, I was in a speech and debate class, so it was about expository speaking. That's one person telling a story. We would also debate, so it was more of a Lincoln Douglas style, one-on-one on an issue. Lincoln Douglas is an interesting debate. It's been sort of corrupted with political debates today, but it, of course, finds its origin in the actual Lincoln Douglas debate from a few years ago. So a winner and a loser is sort of a natural thing, whether it's a competition or whether the results of a debate, the outcome of a debate, the perception of the winner and loser somehow factors into an election or some other process or selection or something where the people making the selection are not necessarily well versed in the issue or the subject matter, so that the convincing the audience ends up being the goal, right? So the winner is the one who gets the audience mind share. They end up voting for that person, or they end up buying the product or supporting the position or whatever it is. The definition of what a win or a loss is in a debate situation may be set beforehand. So you must be factually correct, or whatever it is. So competitive debates, which you'll find in academic settings, high school, college, tend to be a little bit more rigorously defined with some ground rules, if you will. If you are looking at televised debates, presidential debates, the rules tend to get bent very quickly. This becomes more of a performative event for the audience. The cheer, when you hear for an upcoming debate in July, no audience, therefore you get no cheering and hooting and hollering and booing and so on. So those are distraction and time, consumers of time sinks. So when you make for a quiet debate, when you have hard time limits, not speaking over each other, turning off microphones, with more rigorous ground rules, you tend to make for a boring debate where you can actually talk one at a time, addressing a particular issue. This still doesn't happen. There will still be wandering in and out of topical discussion. I will speculate that ad hominem will come into play for the debate coming up July 11, 2024. So we'll see. We'll see how that unfolds. But the case for competitive debates in academic and similar settings is interesting and educational, just as a matter of debate, learning how to debate. More often with public debates, though, the winner is a matter of popularity, zingers, persona, whether an audience agrees or not, whether the clips and the highlight reel generated from motivated reasoning, the winner can be very subjective. Both sides won, depending on which version of the clips you watch. So they can be useful, these debates, in the world, but social media is only more and more performative, has an agenda, views, likes, shares, monetization. So exciting smackdown debates are more interesting than factual subject matter expert, issue-driven, fact-driven, friendly outcomes, a handshake at the beginning and the end, both sides saying, that was useful to me. The debate bros concept, which started off and I think is probably still majority male, however you want to use that term, debate bros has exploded. everyone is debating everyone else. We've almost lost the notion of what a debate should be or could be. It's really just a performance with clips and with excerpts and with reactions and so on. YouTube itself is largely performative, of course. There are those who create educational content, whether it's history or science or how-to videos and so on. They're still performative. You have a personality and you have a viewpoint and so on, production value, etc. But generally speaking, the real performative content has become attack. Who won? Who smacked down the other? Who do I agree with? And did they dominate, destroy, crush the other side? No more true than in political topics, but it could be true about a lot of things, especially with debates on YouTube, with monetary rewards for drawing and maintaining engagement per episode and then per channel. So if you specialize in reacting to debates and reaction to debates are tricky because you can do so without response from any of the parties involved. So you can select your own clips. You can steer the judgment of your audience to agree with your viewpoint, and you can bolster cases that agree with you, and you can completely remove or you can diminish the value of anything that doesn't agree. So those are tricky. I think they're generally unhealthy. There was always a long time ago before YouTube, whenever there was a State of the Union address or major political press conference, or especially, the president is going to make a statement at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So it would be the president in the Oval Office sitting at a desk, looking directly into a camera. And then right after, whether it's a presidential debate, whether it's whether it's the president or any political or anyone, there'd be the after action discussion, a panel of experts who would reinterpret what was just said. And that was always a point of joke and now they're going to tell us what that person just said. And of course it would be shaded by different viewpoints and so on. And nowadays you could watch, pick your favorite news outlet, cable news, if you will. Does cable still exist? And you will always find that the best way to figure out what the person just said, aside from listening to them or reading a specifically word-for-word transcript rather than a summary or excerpts, you can take CNN, MSNBC, Fox, media, something. There are a variety of outlets now. Take all of them and somehow add them together, and you might have a complete picture. Motivated reasoning, to be sure, selection, different types of bias, different fallacious arguments made based on selection of excerpts and clips and so on. So yeah, YouTube debates only magnify this or amplify. So what we end up with is a collection of people, not only bros, but anybody from any variety of individuals from many walks of life across an entire spectrum of everything, who become well known or better known for debating anyone about anything, whether they're an expert at it or not. Occasionally expertise will be assigned by an audience because they're good at debate. Therefore, they must be good at debating anyone. You'll see this also in subject matter experts who opine on topics that are not in their purview of expertise, but because they're good at one thing, like, let's face it, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, Sabine Hassenfelder, any of the Weinsteins. There are a substantial number of intellectuals on YouTube who are, they are PhD bearing, specific focus areas with real research and real expertise that is not to be diminished. If you are a physics professor and you focus on cosmology or astrophysics or particle physics or theoretical or experimental or whatever you've been doing this for years, that's great. Should you also come across, should you present your notions with the same level of credibility when you want to talk about economy or transgenderism or well, you're no longer an expert in that. You're just a normal layperson. But if you are assigned credibility, you can actually undo some of your subject matter expertise in the way you try to present yourself as an expert. By the way, I'm not an expert in any of those things. My subject matter expertise is more along the lines of computer architecture, computer engineering, a few other things that I'm probably pretty good at. So everything I'm saying here today is my opinion as a consumer of debates, but someone who I read a lot. I will often read background information, and I will try to familiarize myself with different aspects of a particular issue. And this is one reason I do consume these types of debates. They're not valuable on their own, but you can actually find different facets of an issue that you may find other people are emphasizing. That becomes interesting to look into. Is that really true? Is what they're saying plausible? You can hear all manner of assertions being made on both sides of the recent conviction. We know what I'm talking about. But for those of you in the future, or if I'm in the past, you're in my future. When a former president is convicted of felonies, the nature of the case, the nature of the handling of the case, all aspects are subject to comment and critique. And when the critique of one individual facet takes on so much variance, one side versus the other can literally come away with, that is red. No, it's blue. And it's plain to see. But unfortunately, a confirmation bias, that's probably my favorite. That's not a logical fallacy, though. But what is it? That would be the availability heuristic. Is you hear what confirms your preconceived notion. It's another form of motivated reasoning. So you come away believing one side when clearly there are two sides that somehow meet in the middle. What is it? There's the left, the right, and the truth, or something. So we end up with a collection of people who have their assigned. So I'm not even talking about subject matter experts for real. I'm talking about people who sit on YouTube all day with a camera pointed at them, with a chat screen, with all kinds of stuff flowing by, and a chat person, especially if they've given money, if they're a subscriber or a super chatter or whatever. Oh, my Patreon viewers, they suggested I debate this person on something. So they're completely performative. They have their fan club or their side. So it becomes like a sporting event, except that the ladder, the competitive terrain as mapped out by who should compete against whom and who's the winner, and that person should go on to debate the next, the rankings and who's better than, and then this person smacked that person down. It becomes entirely performative, and I believe less valuable. It devalues the notion of casual conversation in a debate form, like a real substantive conversation that probably isn't a debate, but is more of a conversation with different opinions that can be different, but which might change through the course of or as a result of the conversation. If that's a debate, then fine. But if you call a debate what these are becoming, which is entirely performative, a question of who's cheering the loudest or who's going to clip the best zinger moments and highlight those and then react to them and highlight and amplify sometimes completely fallacious thinking, I believe those are a disservice over time. And that's where the clips and slaps come in the next section of my notes. The goal of social media is no secret: attention and engagement. That's it. Eyeballs. For the sake of monetization. So not only for the content creator, but for the platform. That's why the platform algorithm, you think it's to serve you, Like, we're just going to show you stuff you're interested in. No, we're going to show you stuff that you will tend to watch so that we make money on your eyeballs and attention. And we'll give some of it half, less than half, to the content creator. So there's an incentive to be more exciting, more attractive, more attention grabbing. That's how headlines work. So that's no secret. Sensational debates, part of the formula. So clipping the highlight reel from a so-called debate can drive enormous traffic that aligns with short attention span, the political and ideological leanings of an audience, and a desire to the best or worst parts of the debate. I'm sorry. What is it? That aligns with, the clips that align with not only the short attention span, but the best or worst parts of the debate itself, without sitting through all of that blathering. The conversation itself is part of the debate, but if you're only interested in the highlight reel, you're not going to see the game being played. You're only going to see the most exciting parts, where the most damage is done, the most performance. And so here's where you get a distorted view of the actual substance of the debate to align with an audience. So if your audience is mostly leaning to one side of the opposition, the opposing parties of the debate, so there's whichever side that you agree with, the opposition is the side you hate. So you want to see them get crushed. So you can edit together a highlight reel of the debate. I believe the Dave Smith, Chris Cuomo debate is 3+ hours. I think I have that one open. Yeah, just 3 hours, 10 minutes. That is total time. So you could probably trim away some of the silliness, but you have some moderator participation, not in a structured way. The discussions are meandering. They pull up evidentiary clips now and then, which is actually good. In a real policy debate, they could literally provide evidence for an assertion and then argue against, and so on. So a policy debate, not too far off. I mean, different still, but not too far off from an actual courtroom process with presentation of evidence and supporting evidence of an assertion or of statements. So you're not cross-examining. So in the case of the Dave Smith Cuomo quote unquote debate, it was really more of a cross-examination, to be honest. But if you can present supporting evidence during a debate, you lend some credibility to assertions made. So I find that interesting, something that we could think about for more legitimate debates, but we're not really interested in that. So enormous traffic and short attention spans, good combination. By gathering together a highlight reel celebrating one particular personality, smacking down or slapping multiple opponents, crushing. So you're not in just one debate. You take you'll find these videos, including Christopher Hitchens, who was a very knowledgeable and talented writer, very intellectually interesting, but also known for clever quips and condescension and witticisms and so on. So his presentation style is often celebrated posthumously now. So you could create a 2 hours of Christopher Hitchens annihilating his opponents, and they just choose the moments where he slaps them down with some wit, some callbacks, as comedians might say. And the Barack Obama Mitt Romney debate, where Obama does the callback to the misstatement about Russia being the enemy, that is clever and still strategically useful, but not completely. I mean, it's not in bad faith necessarily, but it doesn't advance the policy discussion. It only serves to differentiate the candidates on wit, not mitt, on wit and clever. Callbacks are always appreciated, no matter what. If you are able to work in a callback somehow, you will always get some sort of applause or recognition for the ability to do that, and that's sort of a representation of the ability to think on one's feet, so to speak. So, but that is something to be aware of, is that when you construct these when you're celebrated for only doing zingers, which is not the case with Hitchens, but certainly there are Hitchens clip reels. You can do the same with Sam Harris. You can do the same with Ben Shapiro. There are a number of, they're not quite debate bros, but sort of, there are a number of characters in the space who are known for making zinger responses, crushing their opponents with their debate skills with a Z, and we begin to develop favorite players. We develop celebrities for the sake of their ability to be performative on the debate stage, whether it's a stage or just two rectangles on a computer monitor. They're frequent winners, and we can celebrate not only their victories over time, but eventually they will fail. They will, some opinion will slip out from 20 years ago. Maybe not a tweet, but something was said, or some position was held, or some detail will come out, or they will have fine opinions on their subject matter expertise, but then they'll come out with some ridiculous notions, political or wherever it comes from, where everyone will say, wait a minute. So they will kind of fail in the public light. They may be defeated, especially if they figure, I will debate you on something I don't really know about because I'm so good at debating. So they'll be defeated and then eventually disgraced. And that is the nature of the game. And so we always enjoy supporting the climb, but we certainly love watching the fall. And if debating becomes about that, it's no longer about substantive, educational, advancing the discussion. It's about the debaters, the players, and whether they get injured, whether it's a car crash on a racetrack, right? These are the things that are exciting to people, unfortunately. And then we have meta debates and logical fallacies. So I've already referred to some logical fallacies. I probably should have picked my favorite before this, but I'm not focusing on my favorite logical fallacy for this program. But they are interesting. It's an interesting exercise to point out when people are using logical fallacies to make an argument when it doesn't really make sense. If you can point out the logical fallacy, you will probably come off as condescending. But if you can use the logical fallacy against the person, you will probably come across as more adept at presenting your argument, your opinion. But meta debates are a challenge, I think. Many debates we see on platforms like YouTube. There may be others, but YouTube certainly is making itself a debate bro platform. Some debate sis, debate people, master debaters are assembled ad hoc. That means, like I said, sometimes there'll be a chat on a live stream, and they'll say, you should debate this person. And maybe that will happen, and they will appear together, often cross-promoting each other. So one person will appear on the other's channel and vice versa. On YouTube, probably, on a live stream, and then there'll be chatters on both sides. The fun part in that situation is whether both sides can see the chat streams of the other, but there will be people literally cheering or providing commentary or supporting evidence or links or bashing each other. Who knows? It's kind of a free-for-all. But meta debates, without an actual moderator or formal timing, so it just becomes an argument or discussion, maybe can be viewed as a debate, with little in the way of fact-checking other than the chat people. And I say meta debates because quite often what you end up with is one side of an argument is maybe a studious layperson like Destiny. He's kind of famous now for being the Wikipedia expert. He researches a topic and becomes a debater on the topic for researching it. That is one way to go. Can you debate a subject matter expert based on some Wikipedia articles? I'm going to say no, but I think he does it anyway. While the other side might be a subject matter expert for real, or they may be a person on the street. They may be someone who just says, I'm going to argue with you. And they argue from meta content. So they're arguing, their entire notion of the issue, the subject, is taken from opinions of others who may be subject matter experts. They may be person on the street. They may be somewhere in between. They may be complete charlatans. They may have a particular take based on a political or ideological view, which then completely shades the position and presentation by this other person. So the meta debate is not about the topic, but it's about what one or both sides have heard about the topic, or what they think they understand about the topic. And certainly the pandemic has no shortage of this. Take a moment to learn about the immune system in humans, and you will not be able to credibly argue anything if you have not been studying immunology for a decade or so. So anything you think you know will be based on anecdotal observation, proximal, so availability heuristic comes into play. You have selected the science that you want because you either understand it or it agrees with your preconceived notions or position, or all of those. And so the meta debate is between people who don't really know what they're talking about, but they've become misinformation experts. They've become expert in the information they've consumed, not necessarily in the facts. So again, you have the left, the right, and the truth, for example. So if you're arguing with somebody, debating with someone who heard something on Joe Rogan, be prepared for the worst. These glorified bar fights at that point tend to be appeals to emotion. Their motivated reasoning, obviously consumed from respective sources. So whoever's side agrees with me, I'm going to read and write and listen and participate in that side and completely diminish the, whichever condescension, nicknames and however they refer to each side. So those, them, they don't know what they're talking about because they are them and they are not we. So you end up with anonymous trolls and robots informing each side of a debate, in this case, when you don't have real, knowledgeable subject matter experts is nice, although people who just understand a topic from practicality, from practical experience, if you like, or other insights. You could have a investigative journalist on one side, and it would not be good, I think, to have a doctor or well, it depends. So let me try to restate this example I'm trying to build in real time here. Investigative journalist who has talked to many researchers about mRNA vaccines and efficacy and the way that they were qualified, versus a doctor who has a private practice who saw a particular collection of patients from a limited geographical area. They would have very differing views on the impact of vaccination on illness. Should they be debating? Well, one is a subject matter expert in treating patients, especially if they're a general practitioner. They're treating all manner of symptoms and causes and so on. Another has simply talked to people, but has been proactive in approaching the topic and getting supporting information and so on. Neither of those people is going to have a similar starting point, well, aside from vaccines good, vaccines bad, perhaps, but neither of them will have a sort of a matching basis of discussion, so they should not be debating. You could say the same of the Rogan proposed debate, having an attorney versus a research scientist debate the efficacy of a vaccine, the qualification process during different phases of trials to judge the efficacy and the safety. They're just going to have completely and totally different viewpoints. So they become bar fights. They're not really debating the issues because neither has a background in the issue or issues that makes a useful, constructive debate possible. So they're really just going to go arguing with each other. And it becomes very exciting because who doesn't like to watch a bar fight or a boxing match or a wrestling match or mixed martial arts or any of these things? Very exciting. It doesn't mean that they're great from a constructive and meaningful, good faith point of view. So when you see these bar fights built on motivated reasoning, that is consumed from these other sources, the greatest dopamine, sources of greatest dopamine. So the wherever people get excited the most, that's the sources that they're going to enjoy consuming. And then when you hear or see people debating based on those same things, you get a certain amount of cheering on both sides, and any number of logical fallacies help the flames grow. Ironically, perhaps ad hominem doesn't appear too often, almost because it's too obvious. It's too much of a punch below the belt, perhaps. So you won't always see it's not absent, but ad hominem attacks, so attacking vitriol is also not too common, although we get there too sometimes. But ad hominem is not really clever. It's kind of the mark of it's a strategy of someone losing, right? To start attacking the debater directly. In general, that's bad form, but you let your audience do that. You let the after action discussion talk about what a loser the other person was, how they came off looking like an idiot, they didn't know what they were talking about, etc. So if you're creative, you don't have to use ad hominem or vitriol or any of the what I would say is the weaker method of participating in a debate, but you can let your fans do it for you. Clever diminution of one's opponent is a more valid way to conduct such a strategy, and then again, let your fans do the dirty work. Should anyone be a debate opponent because they want to be? So again, here the Rogan challenge. Should anyone just show up to a debate? I believe it was the physicist Green. Is it Michael Green? David Green. Michael Green? I think it's Michael. To the Google. Brian Green. How could I get that so wrong? Brian Green. Somebody asked him one time, I don't know where or when, but somebody said, would you ever go and debate somebody about a physics concept? Now, Brian Green does a lot of science education. He does a lot of informative presentations and panel shows about different physics topics. I find him interesting. So when the question was asked, would you consider debating someone, he said, debates that are not in completely good faith tend to be counterproductive. And I'm paraphrasing here, of course. They tend to be counterproductive because it's not about constructive conversation to arrive at more knowledge. Like everyone from a constructive, especially academic debate, could and maybe should come away having learned something. He said, instead you spend time arguing fallacies, and you can throw fallacies at someone rapid fire, and they simply, first of all, they have to figure out what you're talking about. Sorry, doing a little mousing around. They have to figure out what you're talking about, and then they have to figure out how to come back to something credible. So if you're arguing with a subject matter expert and you say, if you're talking to a meteorologist and you're like, the sky is green, and they're like, no, it isn't. Prove it. Or the earth is flat. Similar. And you're like, but how can you, why do you have to prove, it's sort of implicitly accepted as starting point for some discussions. The sky is blue, the earth is round, and so on. So if the starting point is so completely off the beaten path, it becomes a question of, well, how am I going to spend the time countering ridiculous, which doesn't advance any cause? So his argument was, I don't want to represent science in a circumstance where the attacks would discredit the facts with total chaos. And I'm grossly paraphrasing him in this case. But essentially what he was saying was, I don't want to enter a bar fight because he can't win. The rules are not the same as an academic panel discussion with Q&A. You can have a question from the audience that completely disagrees with the panel, but they're asking a question. They're not taking an hour to pelt their opponent with chaos. So yeah, debates can very quickly go off the rails, especially with poor or no moderation, no structure, no time limits. Again, I would be fascinated to see a policy debate where you have two people on each side so that they can gather facts, they can refer to details that are correct. Supporting evidence and presentation can be meaningful and based on real information, not what they happen to remember or happen to piece together on the fly. Being quick on your feet is fine, as the saying goes. Being quick on your feet, fast on your feet, is useful. It's part of a presentation style. But if you're only going to throw bad information at someone, then it becomes a kind of a waste of time and effort, or a massive distraction, or arguably, if it's done intentionally, an act of bad faith in the debate. This is what Brian Greene is arguing against, essentially, is bad faith debaters who are going to spend the time with distraction. It doesn't really get anybody anywhere. So with a mismatch across one or more dimensions, so when you have people with different backgrounds, my example with the reporter and the doctor, or Brian Greene's assertions, or et cetera, the debates quickly devolve into a collection of zinger sound bites and talking over one another, and a meandering path of destructive interaction. Could be on the topic, could be off the topic. It goes all over the place. And then the worst case is then people they clip those arguments that don't go anywhere, but they could be viewed by some as, oh, look at that, the flat earther got a good hit in on what is the true value of that? We can call it priority inversion, perhaps. If an audience intent on watching a fight determines that an ignorant challenger somehow defeats a subject matter expert, right? So as I just described, the flat earther got one in on the guy that thinks the planet is round. What is that guy thinking? Based on hearsay and fallacy and so on, suddenly there is a new champion. Like the flat earther won. Now we can all believe the flat earth argument. That victory will then be used to justify additional debates along fallacious lines. So now suddenly flat earth and by the way, I'm picking flat earth in this case because there are people who create YouTube videos debunking flat earthers. This is still a topic that gets time. It gets data storage on a server somewhere. It gets electrons flowing through the internet, energy expended on lighting this person with a microphone, spending time debunking flat earthers. I guess whatever gets you an audience. It's something straight out of Idiocracy. So can this improve? And we're coming to the end, I promise. When everyone is a subject matter expert, no one is. And I'm paraphrasing The Incredibles, of course. A movie, in that case, if everyone is super, no one is. If we believe that a subject matter expert and a Joe Rogan fan are well matched to debate the subject matter of expertise on the one hand, then what have we become? You should not be... I mean, it really comes down to just like sporting events, unfortunately. You cannot demand to play tennis against a tennis champion, golf against a golf champion, debate against a debate champion. What makes the debate champion, though, is questionable because there are rules for sporting events. There are rules that you follow so that to become a champion, you climb the ladder, you're besting opponents according to the same rules and so on. In the world of online YouTuber debates, all that kind of goes out the window, and it's just whoever gets the most views and clicks and retweets and reaction videos and so on. So now it's a question of performance over substance. That does not bode well for the near term. A return to a credibility hierarchy seems unlikely in the near or medium terms. So even an aha moment in the future can be based on radical misinterpretation of data, yielding information that is not factually valuable, but which serves to feed back into fallacious arguments and motivated reasoning. So then you get like, I knew it. It was bats in a soup, right? So with the right amount of attention, the right amount of views, the right popularity by the right person who is famously a slapdown artist who crushes their debate opponents, but they'll come out with something that's ridiculous, but they get a lot of attention. And sad to say, Joe Rogan kind of falls into this category. You can hear during the Dave Smith, Chris Cuomo debate, and again, not a fan of either myself, they're talking about ivermectin, the famous ivermectin, and Joe Rogan, and how Joe Rogan used it when he was became ill and diagnosed with COVID-19. He did use COVID, but if you play back the tape, he was also taking monoclonals. He was taking remdesivir, I think it was. He was on a full cocktail because presumably he had the money and access to these things. So he was taking everything. And at the time I made this reference, I don't know if I could find it somewhere. If you are a fan at all of the old Beverly Hillbillies, there's an episode dedicated to Granny's cure for the common cold. So their neighbor, Mr. Drysdale, I believe it is, the bank president where they keep all their millions, he's very excited at the potential for like a cure for the common cold. That would make me rich. I must buy it. I must acquire this thing. So they finally get Granny to acquiesce, and she has some sort of a soup or something. And they say, so Granny, how does it work? I think it's after he buys it. He said, oh, you just eat my soup and then you rest in bed for about 7 days and drink plenty of liquids. And he's like, but that's what you do anyway. So I believe that Granny and the Clampetts truly felt that this was a component of a common cure cold. That was in the script anyway. But the take home is that if you only focus on the cure for the common cold, then you don't realize that it's a collection of things you are doing, and you only focus on the cure that Granny has created, the ivermectin, but you're not saying, but what about the remdesivir and the monoclonals and the other treatments? But if you only focus on the controversial treatment therapy, then it becomes a supportive instance of use of that. And so that came up quite a bit in the this quote-unquote debate, which again I will call a cross-examination, but not valuable when you select certain elements. You pare it down to the parts that support your notion, motivated reasoning, and you present that as fact when it's really partial fact, selective fact. And indeed, at the time, if you heard Daniel Griffin, and Vincent Racaniello, they do their This Week in Virology, and they would have a clinical discussion every week during pandemic times. I think they still do it. They pointed out that, monoclonals are effective. They've been shown to work if they are given at the correct time. I think it was remdesivir that had to be given within like the first day of infection. So if you could detect or otherwise identify a person identified within 24 hours of being infected, I think it was remdesivir had a certain amount of efficacy. Monoclonals had a certain amount of efficacy in there. Eventually, it was determined that ventilators were not good. So that was avoided. So yeah, at some point you come away with, here's a collection of treatments. We're going to throw everything at it, including ivermectin. So you can't say, well, it was the ivermectin. That was a lot of time spent on that. Sorry. So the credibility hierarchy, where people with subject matter expertise are at the upper end of a hierarchy, and people who just read Wikipedia or listen to Joe Rogan maybe towards the bottom. And I will say, while I do refer to Wikipedia on my programs often, they are a starting point. You can certainly begin a research path, but if you don't find yourself reading NIH or Nature articles, if you're talking about biological science and health, if you don't find yourself reading IEEE or physics papers or reading about mathematical theory, right? If you don't find yourself in these types of documents and research and reading about how hypotheses were proven incorrect, right? Falsifiable studies rather than clearly correct. I'm not even going to try to find invalidating information. So if you actually do your own research, but you do it for real, that's an educational experience that you can actually learn from. But if you are merely consuming the loudest voice that you already agreed with before, then you are not taking advantage of a credibility hierarchy. You're just assigning credibility or accepting it from the opinions, views, and personalities that you like. So yeah, they're not factually valuable at that point. Perhaps in the long term, the value of knowledge and experience, whether related to science or anything else. So it could be any subject matter expert or expertise of any kind that is real in any topic, will be realized. The notion that anyone can do anything, anytime, anywhere, as long as they have enough likes to do it is not great, not ultimately great. More and more of the unwashed masses have to realize that making a 15-second video clip or slapping someone with an ignorant or fallacious zinger may get views and likes and shares, may get your 15-second clip a 300-word article or a lot of shares and reactions and or duets or stitches or whatever, but it doesn't make sense. Perhaps then the value of real expertise, knowledge, experience will re-enter their proper places in discussion and education. Until then, so I'm reading the final part of my note here, until then, it seems likely that those who could be sharing real value choose to avoid the chaos of silly, and this is a loss for now. So the people like Brian Greene, for example, don't want to debate. Now he does make himself known, and he does participate in public science education, so he's not hiding himself away. But when good faith, honest debate with subject matter experts or people with at least a level of expertise that will elevate such a debate to actually debating the differences, not debating the arguments. Where did that fact come from? Is that a fact? No. So if both sides, I should say, so any number of people on either side who enter into a debate session, the policy debate idea. So if you like, and I'm kind of liking this notion I proposed here. I just came up with it while I was recording this. If you had two subject matter experts with similar backgrounds but differing opinions on a particular topic, like let's say something that's a little bit more accessible. Like you got two pizza experts. One is all about folding the slice. One is all about the fork and knife. Clearly the folding of the slice is correct, but for this case, we'll assume that both have a valid argument. They're both pizza experts. They've both been preparing pizza of excellent quality for decades. Maybe they're both from New York. Who knows? One's from New York, one's from Chicago, maybe. So these are subject matter experts with differing opinions, but based on the same general principles. Now the arguments are not about, you don't know what you're talking about with pizza. Well, they might get to that eventually. But it's really about what's the mechanics of the folding. Do you risk the cheese coming off? Do you risk pulling all the cheese off with the first bite? The knife and the fork, are you really getting to enjoy there's the specifics of the issue at hand can be discussed. And the panel, RFK may suggest that it's unethical to eat pizza with a knife and a fork, and there needs to be more double-blind studies and so on. But at the end of the day, you're debating the specifics, not the generalities or the fallacious arguments or the attacks and so on. So I think the return or a return to that form of debate might be interesting. If we just get anybody who is willing to pick up a microphone and a web camera and wants to start spouting off, if that becomes the nature of debate, then all bets are off. And the question as to whether this can improve is whether the consuming public will recognize this difference, or whether the incentives behind sensational programming with anyone who is merely entertaining garnering the same attention and assigned the same credibility as an actual subject matter expert or an actually knowledgeable person, there's nothing that can be done. If a tree falls in the woods and there's nobody there to hear it, right? Similarly, if people debate a topic but nobody cares to listen, did it really matter? In that case, if both sides of that debate come away having learned something, but nobody else knows, then, in the microcosm of that debate, there was some lessons learned. But the nature of debate nowadays, the value given to presidential debates or other political debates, often based on the sports fan mentality, the us-them, driven by advertiser dollars. There was an article I saw somewhere that CNN is planning on just raking in the dough for advertisement during the presidential debates, which they're hosting the first one in July. So it's money and attention and clicks and, oh yeah, that's right. They're going to talk about some sort of, who knows what. As long as we get the advertising revenue, that's all that matters. And that is an unfortunate state of affairs, but that is where we are. It will only change when you become more proactively interested in substantive, running out of energy here, substantive discussion, debate, argument that results in learning something. Whoever learns something, all parties involved can learn something. But if you come away with a winner based on zingers and not winning based on learning, on new insights, on maybe changing an opinion, maybe meeting in the middle. If that's not the case, then it is 100% performative. You may as well turn the channel and watch watch the WNBA and the newfound drama of full contact basketball. But that's where I will leave it today. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo if you want to find out more about the various programs I'm producing now and in the future. Or in the past, if you're listening to this in my future, it will be between my current and your current. Anything that comes up will appear on my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page and my ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo announcement profile thing as well. Both places enable you to buy coffee, which is indeed where any monies would go. Towards coffee, which powers all of my projects, but you are under no obligation to spend any money. I use those as a way to engage people in a way other than on my own websites, which by the time you are listening to this in my future, will hopefully still exist. Take care, and thank you for listening. That is Debatable. Bye.